Welcome to episode 14 of the Ready for More podcast.
So one of my main messages is to pay yourself first. Even if you're an entrepreneur like me who wants to make millions or wants to make thousands, but whatever that amount is, make sure that you're paying yourself first.
Welcome to the Ready for More podcast, where we share success strategies and stories for women business owners, entrepreneurs who are ready for more for yourself and for your business. I'm your host, Heather Cameron, and I'm here to help you to discover your unique path to profitability, success, so you can achieve your more on your own terms. Are you ready for more? You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. Welcome to episode 14 of the Ready for More podcast. My guest today is Karen Trepte of KT Finances. Karen's passion is helping entrepreneurs to manage their finances so that they can set themselves up for long-term success. Karen was born in the world of finance and has loved finances since she was 5 years old. Welcome, Karen, and thank you for joining me.
You're so welcome, Heather. I am absolutely thrilled to be on here with you.
That was your bio. Can you tell me a bit more about what you do as a business and what your business is about?
Sure, absolutely. So I actually market for over 100 of the top financial firms in the United States. And I often refer to myself as a personal finance shopper because all my financial consultations are 100% free, which I love. I get commissions from the companies once I find the good match for people. And what that allows me to do is really advocate for my clients, which is my favorite part, sit next to them either virtually or literally, locally, figure out with them, brainstorm with them, what are your goals, where do you want to go, what do you want to achieve financially, and then we hit the pause button. I go out and I do the research and the work with all the different companies, letting the companies bid for their business. And then I come back to the table, usually about a week later or so, and give my clients about maybe 2 options, once in a while 3. Sometimes if we really nail the goals in the first session, only 1 that I think is really going to fit for them. And then we work from there.
Excellent. How long have you been doing that?
I've been doing that for actually this specific business for over a year. In terms of my own financial experience, for about 44 years.
That's a lot of experience. What led you to where you are now? Because I know in your bio that I didn't read out, you have such an interesting, eclectic kind of background. Can you give us a little bit about your background and what led you to where you are at the moment?
Sure. My dad opened Merrill Lynch. For those of your audience who are too young to know what that is, it's a major stock brokerage firm. So he opened that firm in Tokyo, Japan, and he opened it before the Japanese were even able to buy stocks on the US stock exchange, which is quite different today. But that really led me to a love of finance. I was first born, so I was treated a bit like a son. And I love that because I was given those gifts of being taught about finance and doing all things finance related. In fact, a funny story is that I was given a budget when I was little, and maybe $2, something like that.
Which probably was a big budget, you know.
And then I was instructed or scolded or encouraged, no, Karen, you're spending too much of that on comic books. So, and then my dad helped me along. I built my first house at the age of 21. I had a very small inheritance from an aunt who passed away. So I built my first house, and that really led to even more financial love, and ended up flipping homes. So doing quite a bit in the real estate world.
Cool. Excellent. That's a lot of different stages. And I like what you said about your dad installing your knowledge of finances, because I think in our podcast, our audience is women entrepreneurs 40 plus. A lot of women haven't been taught finances. And I'm sure that you run into that in your area and in your expertise and who you interact with.
I do so much, and that's why my passion is really to help women to get them set up for long-term savings and to do that in a safe way, because there are secrets of the wealthy out there, at least for the US, products that have been around since 1913, that back in those days you had to be a millionaire, literally, to take advantage of, which would be like equivalent to somewhere around $50 million person today. So undoable, right, for most of the population. Fast forward, kind of like the iPhone 1 going to the iPhone 10. Things have changed dramatically, right? So now people can invest for as little as $100 a month or $200 a month. And the earlier they do that in life, the more money they're going to have later.
That whole sense of just understanding money and understanding finances is an important part of being an entrepreneur. Well, as I said, my audience is entrepreneurs, of being an entrepreneur, of just knowing that. So in your entrepreneurial journey, what lessons have you learned that you could share about that whole relationship with money? You often hear it called money mindset, but that relationship that women have with money that entrepreneurs need to have with money.
Oh my gosh, Heather. I mean, the first huge mistake I made in my business, because I had brick and mortar businesses earlier on as well. Just to go back a little bit, I went to an Ivy League school, but I dropped out of corporate because I missed my children so much. So I ended up running a daycare at home, which was honestly a shock to my parents, but one of the best decisions I've made in my entire life, because it enabled me to watch them in those precious years grow up. So I would say that my first big mistake was equating online business to the former brick and mortar shops that I'd had, the daycare, the flower shop I'd run, etc. It's quite a different beast, and I ended up spending way, way too much money. So one of my main messages is to pay yourself first. Even if you're an entrepreneur like me who wants to make millions or wants to make thousands, whatever that amount is, especially when you work with Heather, you'll be way empowered around that. But whatever that amount is, make sure that you're paying yourself first, because otherwise it's sort of like my daughter saying to me, which I got, it's kind of like throwing all your money on red in a poker table, or, it's so risky. And I think a lot of people don't realize, I know, even though I have an MBA, even though I have 2 master's degrees, I went to College of Financial Planning, I still didn't know about online business. I still didn't know all the things that I needed to learn. I put way too much money in my website to begin with. I was told by a coach that it will change, but I'm pretty stubborn or persistent, pick your word. And so I didn't believe it. And sure enough, it's changed. So there wasn't that need in the beginning really to put in so much resources.
I love what you say about pay yourself first. I've coached people who, I remember once coaching someone about 8 or 9 years back, and she put all her business plans together, and she's like, I'm profitable. I'm like, are you paying yourself? No. Well, you're not profitable if you're not paying yourself, if you're not, if you don't perceive your own worth. And I've had a number of clients who are like that, who, they have other sources of income. But that doesn't mean that you still don't have the right to make money, and that you don't have the right to run a successful business, or they're struggling. And are you paying yourself? And like, oh, I didn't really think about paying myself, right? To see that I'm someone, whether you pay yourself through dividends or some creative accounting, because we all have different accounting rules in the countries that we live in. But that concept of still paying yourself first and putting money into yourself and perceiving yourself as value that should be paid for is an important part of business. So I love that as a piece of learning and a piece of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Really, really important to do that.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't need, it's just, we don't need all the bells and whistles. We just need to focus and do that. So that's a great learning. Running your own business isn't easy. and not necessarily, I'm sure it's not easy as a woman in the financial circles where there are more men. What drives you to run your own business? What drives you to be in that, and
Well, I'm such a rebel. I mean, let's just get real. I'm such a rebel. And I mean, there's the old joke in the entrepreneur world, right? I mean, we're the only ones that don't want to work 40 hours for somebody else, and we're willing to work like 100 hours a week for ourselves. And like you say, not even pay ourselves in the beginning. But I have struggled with this. I mean, I have thought, well, maybe I need to I've worked for a big company, mortgage company. I've worked corporate. So I thought, well, maybe I need to put on my suit. But it's just not me. So, I mean, really the advantage that my customers get is that I'm just a warm human being that loves them. And I'm willing to say that out loud. And I think there are a lot of people who are scared about finance, and that's why I love being able to coach them for free and help them find a product that really, really suits them. I do work with people in other countries. No, I don't get paid for it, but I will give them at least an hour just to try and brainstorm, because honestly, I got married very young. And even though I built my first house at 21, shortly after that, after the house was built, my first husband took equity out of our home, took like $40,000, which back then was a lot of money in the 1970s. It was enough to buy a house flat out. And he just went and spent it with his girlfriend in Mexico while he sent me to visit my mom, quote unquote, so I was in Massachusetts. I was on the East Coast. So I managed to hang on to that house. We now have 2 properties. But I remember those days really clearly when I fed my daughter split pea soup night after night after night as a single mom, trying to hold on to these assets that, of course, I felt guilt too, because this was money that I'd put in some of my own money, of course, but the main down payment was gifted. So yeah, it's just a passion of mine. And I always tell my clients, a lot of the wealthiest in the world, they have financial advisors. So wouldn't it be nice if just everybody had that? And that's one of the things that my company encourages me to do. And I absolutely adore that. So it's a passion. I know you'd call that a hobby if I'm doing that for free.
No, there's a passion associated with it. It is important.
So anyway, that's one of the reasons that I love to do what I do.
But you bring out something interesting too, as a mother, a single mother, juggling our household. One thing I do find, I mean, I don't have children, but I still have a household and I run it on my own, is that the skills that we have in our life, we don't always bring into our business. Especially for women, I think they have been in positions where, for whatever reasons, they've not been able to celebrate the skills that they have, the natural skills that they have, and if they were to bring some of the skills they have in, stretching the budget when you have a young family and when you don't have a lot of income, to your comment earlier about spending more wisely on your business, is stretching that budget into your business is an important part of it too.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things I teach some of my clients are like businessmen who have $500,000 in the bank. So they don't need any of this kind of coaching. But I have clients on the other end of the spectrum who are just trying to figure out how to save $100 a month. And so I help them. Sometimes they tell me I don't have any money to save. Well, let's take a look. And so we look at their finances together. And a lot of times they're really easy ways that if you put yourself as a priority, you can save that money for yourself. You just have to know that you're worth it, that this is for your future you. It's not like for somebody else. So.
And even I'd like to almost flip what you just said and say it in a business perspective. If you can look at your business and you can look at where your money's going out and you can put the money into your business that's going to work for your business to grow your business. Because there's a lot of, right now there's so much information. I just wrote something today about that. There's so much information coming at us in the internet world. It's easy to spend money in the wrong places. But at the same time, you want to strategically spend money, but to spend money in your business, you need to set targets to make money. And that's whether you're doing, I mean, in your case, even though you're giving advice to your clients for free, you are still being paid at the end result when you do that. So you're still managing your business and creating a profitable business, even though the model isn't a direct payment to you from your clients.
Right. And I also bring people along with me who might want a side hustle, and I teach them how they could bring in some extra cash too. Mm-hmm. So, and I also have like an opt-in on my website to teach people. I mean, it took me years to figure this out, but there are a lot of things that you don't have to pay for to run a business, an online business. So that's one of the opt-ins, is how to save money on your business costs. And a lot of people have found that to be quite valuable.
No, that's a great one, actually, because it doesn't, and your business costs are not country specific. We all have costs. We all run businesses.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
You know, there's an expense there. What would you say is one of the most important things you've learned as a woman entrepreneur in our 40 plus ages? We're both 40 plus listeners. So
yes, yes. I would say, I mean, it's not brand new. Nothing's brand new, but to stick up for myself and really to just pay attention to what I want. It's impossible, I think, to drown out the voices that are negative and saying it's not doable. But I do think it's possible to mute those voices.
I love that.
To really focus on just us and what we want. And really, honestly, I mean, to have a community like this, like you're building, is so valuable. So people know that they're not alone. And certainly they're not alone.
I like that, quieting the voices. I have one of my first episodes for this podcast. One of my giveaways is called Your Should Busters. So it's a different type of voice, but we have all those shoulds. But there's also the other side of that, which I hadn't really thought about, is the people who say you can't. Right. So there's the shoulds, and then there's people who don't understand, you know, what we do as entrepreneurs, or even in the most loving way. I remember my mom would be going, you know, you'd be really good at this. Maybe you should get a job. And I'd be like, Mom, I have a job. Right? Because it's some of the newer jobs that we have, other people don't understand.
It's totally true. And often it's our family members. So that's one piece of advice I would say too. I mean, I've gone round and round a couple times with my own sweet, very loving husband. So my strategy with that is just stay out of that conversation. It's not worth it. I mean, when I present him with $1 million, it'll be different, but.
There you go. Yes. What surprised you the most about the path of, I mean, it's neat that you've owned so many different brick and mortars to online businesses, but what surprised you the most of?
The learning curve. I think the learning curve surprised me the most with an online business. I mean, technology has changed so much. And to do my other businesses, I didn't have to use this technology, but I have had to learn a ton. And I used to just say I wasn't very good at tech. And I've actually changed that tune, because actually now I'm pretty darn good at tech. I'm still not a tech queen. I never will be a tech queen, because that's not my thing. I love people. I love working with people. But I would say that was probably the biggest surprise of how many working pieces, how many different pieces had to be acquired just to begin to have a functional business online.
And even offline these days. I mean, even if you run a brick and mortar store these days, you've got to do a lot of that online presence and understanding it. But I love what you said, because one of the things I'm a firm believer is we can still all learn.
Yes.
And when you stop yourself by saying, I'm not technical, I get that a lot. I have no tech. I'm like, it's not. I had a client the other day and she goes, I can't do all that because I don't have all the pieces. I'm like, do you have email? She said, yes. Can you receive money? Yes. Then you can do everything you need to do. Yes, you want to automate it at some point in time. But if you have those two basic components, a way of communicating and a way of collecting money, you can do a lot these days. Right.
And I mean, being the kind of spoiled brat that I am also a huge proponent, and having read lots of books too, I'm a huge proponent of delegation.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, with Canva, I now know how to do Canva. I now know how to do the graphics, but I hire it out because it's more effective. It's more effective to me. I would say the first thing for business entrepreneurs to get, especially if you're a little intimidated by the tech, is get yourself a VA, which stands for a virtual assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Go hire, find a good recommendation and then go hire somebody for even 1 hour a week, something really inexpensive. Let them help you with that so that you can start focusing on your own zone of genius, which I'm also a huge proponent of. Focus on strengths, not on weaknesses.
No, I love that. The one piece of advice I give people about outsourcing is absolutely outsource stuff. Just never outsource your voice, which happened to someone I know. He actually hired a VA and outsourced his voice and gave the VA the power to do like Facebook posts. And they became ingenuine because it wasn't the person. You could tell it wasn't him posting. You could just by his nature, it wasn't his style.
Right.
So I love VAs, but always keep your voice. Always keep the stuff that you write it roughly, hand it over to a VA, but keep your own voice is an important part of it. But absolutely outsource. And I love your idea of starting with just 1 hour a week, because it's hard. It's hard to give up power. I'm guilty of that. I'm very guilty of that because I am techie savvy. So for me, tech is easy. So it's hard to give up that stuff, but I could be doing other things. So I love your recommendation of just starting with 1 hour and doing that. I think that's a really good piece of advice. What's been your biggest challenge?
I think dealing with myself is probably the honest answer. Dealing with my own mindset, keeping myself out of the critical voice, letting myself learn, acknowledge what I've already learned, just acknowledging over and over again that I'm human and that I'm going to make mistakes. And just learning how to be sweet and loving to myself and not beat myself up for those inevitable mistakes which come when you're learning.
Absolutely. And if you didn't make mistakes, you wouldn't necessarily learn.
True.
So there's an analogy I've shared on other shows, but I just love this. There was a woman speaking here a number of months back who was a high jumper in the Olympics.
Oh my.
And her comment was to young girls, and I think this is important to all of us, is that in their sport, they only win when everybody fails. So when no one can jump any higher, that's when the winners are declared.
Wow.
But everybody has to fail, and they're constantly trying to jump higher, and they're constantly failing because they're always trying to exceed their best. And I thought, and her point was that she learns the most by trying and failing and trying and failing. And that's how she became an Olympic pole jumper, was because she went from being just, trying and then fascinated with the sports, but every single day she's trying, and she wins by being the last person to fail. And it is a really good analogy onto life that, yes, we're going to fail and we're going to learn and we're going to grow from there.
I can identify with that because I actually trained with an Olympic coach. I was quite a swimmer back in the day, and I swam in the All Japan Nationals.
Cool.
But what that sport really taught me was that to compete against myself. So that was a real blessing, because if I shaved a second off of my time, I mean, I did come out with a lot of gold medals, but if I shaved a second off of my time, then that's a victory. And so I think really we have to look at that in business too. Like, okay, if we learned one new skill, if we learned how to do the email, or we learned how to do follow-up, which is another bugaboo for me, to be good about following up, because I grew up in Japan. So much of my personality is soft and submissive from having grown up in that country and not wanting to bother anybody. But I've worked with coaches, and I've also learned that the fortune's in the follow-up. So it's something important to do.
That's a very good piece of advice. I would say Canadians also have a trouble following up sometimes. So but it is the fortunes in the follow-up. I love that. It's an excellent statement. Is there anything that you would have done differently in your starting up in your businesses? Is there anything that you would advise someone new? Spent less money?
I would have spent less money, hands down. I would have not put so much into, well, here's a great example of a huge business blunder, okay? So I even hired somebody to help me with the name of my company. I mean, that was thousands of dollars that were wasted. I have a perfectionistic tendency in me, which works well because my clients will get absolute, like, methodical process from me, and I will work hard for them. But on the other hand, the perfectionist, when I didn't know what I was doing in my brand new business, and I thought naming my business, branding was so important. And we went through this whole process, and I ended up naming my first business Gaijin Works Coaching. And just earlier this year, my daughter said to me, who's worked in marketing before, she doesn't now, but she's like, Mom, I'm your daughter, and I still don't even know how to spell it. So I'm like, I had to kind of throw my hat in the ring and say, you know what, you're right. Now, Gaijin Works Coaching meant a lot to me because it meant my background. Gaijin in Japanese means foreigner. I also, before I went to Japan, I was in Panama, so as a gringo. After I got my MBA, I went with my daughter to the Middle East, and, we were foreigners there. So not only that, it meant to me because I'm always out of the box. I shared with you that I'm a rebel. I've always kind of felt a little bit different. So it meant a lot, but it was not a good business decision. It was a horrible business decision to spend that money. It's better. So if you're thinking about what to name your company, put your own name in there. And, 4 years from now, if you decide to change it to something else, like my KT Finances, I figure people can remember that. K for Karen, T for Trepte. You don't even have to be able to say Trepte. Just KT Finances that has that S, a plural at the end, .com. Done.
Yeah. No, and that's a good piece of advice, because we can get hung up on, you and I are kindred spirits in the same way. I'm a perfectionist to my clients. You'll get fantastic stuff, but it works against me in my own business on occasion. Yeah. Even for launching my podcast, I had planned to launch it like 2 months earlier, 3 months earlier, and I couldn't come up with a name. Yeah. And it was important in that realm to come up with a name. And I finally did. It finally dawned on me one day. But perfectionism is, and in fact, my topic this week was, you have to know when good enough is good enough.
Yes.
When what you're doing is good enough to get your business going, and just get it going. It's better because there's somebody waiting out there to have your services. There's someone waiting to have your financial services. And if you hold back because you're looking for perfect, then you're never going to get your offering out to that person who needs a decision now, not 6 months from now when you actually have things perfect. So.
Absolutely. I also teach time management. Finance is my main focus, but I've done time management before. And so it's always progress over perfection. It's always baby steps. And time and money are so tied together. Baby steps work so well with either of those realms.
Absolutely. From your expertise and from the audience that we're working with, which is that's listening to this is 40 plus women who are in business. What expertise can you give them, or what advice can you give them about, planning their finances to think about potentially more of a long-term view of what they're doing as a business owner?
Well, besides pay yourself first, the next huge tip I would give is an app that does have a charge to it, but it's so small. It's like $3 a month or something. And it's called You Need a Budget. And so the app, if you want to find it on your phone or online, is Y for you, N for need, A for A, and B for budget. So YNAB, YNAB. And it's a fantastic tool. And now I've used all kinds of other money tracking apps. So the first thing is you have to track your money. Like, you have to know where you're spending it. Now, the reason I really love YNAB over something like Mint or anything in that other generation is because it's a totally different paradigm. Most of the money tracking apps out there are what are called forecasting apps, which is just a simple word saying you're guessing what you have for the future. YNAB does not work like that at all. YNAB starts with, what do you have now? How much money do you have now? And if you have $1,000 now or $1 million now, where are the pockets? Where are the buckets that you want that money to go? And it is such a powerful tool, because if you can determine in advance, sure, you might not hit the target, exactly. We're talking about perfectionism to the penny. But if you know where you want your money to go, you're in so much more control as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman. So that I would strongly recommend, to track your money. Besides that, I know people are from all over the world, not necessarily the US, but in the US we have to pay taxes. And if I put everything down on YNAB, it's already itemized for me. At the end of the year, it's like super simple. This is what I spent on my email service. This is what I spent on my VAs. Bang, this is my income. It's all right there. So, yeah, that
Absolutely.
would be really important.
And that's, yes, being on top of your, not scurrying at the end of the year trying to, or whenever you have to do your taxes, trying to figure out where your money goes as a business. And I agree, you shouldn't be in the situation where you're doing that. You need to have budgets and know where your money's going, and understand, being an online business or being a virtual business or being a consulting business, there's not huge costs, but there's still costs. Right. And there are people who will be listening to this who do own brick and mortar stores. And it's interesting, because I find the people I deal with who own brick and mortar or who deal with products are much better at tracking their expenses and their in and out, because they have to. They have an inventory to manage. They have to be able to track their inventory and do that. They're a lot more attuned to financial goals than the service-based people I meet. Who, we got a few marketing expenses over here and we're bringing in kind of chunks over here, but they're not having to pay people. Like when you have a product, you have to pay your product suppliers. You have that balance that you have to continually be on top of. And so I find those people are much better at having a good financial conversation with. I find the service-based people have a more difficult time.
I was so grateful to find this app. It has served me so incredibly well that I did become an affiliate, so I should say that out loud. I can give you a link if you like. That'll give your customers an extra month free, and I think I'll get one extra month free too. So we're talking about $2 or $3 here. But,
absolutely. If you send me the link, I'll put it in the show notes when I put the episode out, because I think any app that helps us get on top of our finances and helps our life become easier is a really important thing.
And they'll give you the first 34 days for free. So even if you just know like what you're spending your money on, it's invaluable.
No, that's great. And you've given two great pieces of advice that go together. When you think about it, your earlier one was pay yourself first. And this one is know your budget and know where your money's going.
So make sure one of those buckets is for you.
Yeah. Make sure one of it, but also make sure you're not like in the world of I call it the shoulds. There's so much saying we should be doing that. Even when it comes to tools.
Yes.
To spending money, you have to have the money to do it, or at least understand that you're investing in your business and when are you going to get a payback for that investment.
That's right.
And you should, as we are, it's okay to say no, not now.
Absolutely.
Until I make X amount of dollars, I can't afford Y.
Absolutely.
To run your business as a separate thing. It's harder when you have, one of the things that I wasn't good at initially, I'm much better at now, is to separate my business and personal finances, to really have a wall between them, which is not always that easy when you're first starting out. So to try and put that wall to make sure that you understand, and then to pay yourself, or if you're going to lend yourself money to your business, at least recognize that you're doing that and that you need to pay it back.
Absolutely. Yep. And business is an investment.
And there are a lot of unique businesses out there. I think that, most, I find there's so many women over 40 who are, particularly potentially in their 50s and 60s, who have finished their first career. I was talking to several people today who are retired nurses, but they're not ready to stop being productive in life. They're not ready to contribute. In fact, I have one client friend who's, she was 82 when she finally sold her business, or 83, and it was her third business. But if you met her, she was like this powerhouse. and she sold her business and is now living on a horse farm somewhere doing something. But just went and she reinvented herself 3 times, was running a really decent sized business, sold that to someone else who's also now a client. But just that ability to build and to rebuild and to, we can be whatever we want to be as women. And being financially savvy, both about, before we got on the call, we were talking about the care that we need when we get old.
Oh,
So
yes.
being
Oh,
savvy about having a business, like to me, often I meet women who have businesses because they're passionate about what they want to do. And I want to get them to be passionate about what they can do for themselves through their business, what they can provide for themselves through their business. And it's important to understand the financial side of that.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, being financially stable, and it's okay to charge money.
Yep.
And I don't know if you have any views on that about women financially charging their worth. If you have any experience or any signs of that.
Let's see. I think her name is Barbara Stanley. I've read a couple of her books, at least 2. I think one of them is called 6-Figure Women, and it's an excellent book. It's just an excellent book all about why we do need to take care of ourselves. I mean, my hand's raised very high, especially growing into Japan, but I think it's way beyond growing up in Japan. I think it's frankly just being a woman and being raised to be a caregiver. And I mean, we were talking about aging. Both of our sets of parents have passed away, and it was very, very difficult because long-term care is one of the things that I encourage my clients to buy so they don't get in these horrible situations that are so expensive. And we both, stopped our businesses to take care of our parents, which I don't regret, and you probably don't either.
No, not at all.
But I think it goes way deeper than that. I think that even when we're not caring for aging parents, or in my case, like my daughter just had a baby, so I actually let go of, I still kept my business, but on a much lower level while I was helping her with a young baby, which is beautiful because now I have a very strong attachment with my bonding with my granddaughter. But I think that we just tend to do that, like, maybe I should just put it in my own terms and you tell me if it resonates. But I know for me, like all my life, I've been taught to take care of other people first. And I think it is a shift, and that's something that's really important to know, that, hey, we're worth it. Like, we're worth taking care of. If you need affirmations to do that, or if you need to just, I'm all about, I'm going to say it out loud. I have an account that's separate from my husband's. Yes, we have joint accounts and I pay bills out of that, but I have my own account as well. And I really think that that's important for people, for women to, I think men is just kind of easy, just like, oh, well, I'll just go take care of myself. But for women, I think it's tougher. So it's really important to charge what we're worth, and to, I love your idea of setting up things. Well, what do you want to do? I think that's great. And then you can have a little YNAB account, like going to Italy with my sister, or, something like that. I mean, that's one of my categories. So.
And that's a great thing for, to recognize that being in business is about taking care of yourself first. It's not about just caring for your clients and giving everything to your clients, because we all want to do that. But if we don't care for ourselves, it's that'll put on the face mask first. But if we don't care for ourselves, but recognize that caring for ourselves is a step up. It's not just like our basic care. We get to have fun. We get to think about our business as a source to allow us to do stuff that we couldn't do without making money in our business.
I so agree. I mean, I've been in this situation. So like I say, I share a lot of mistakes I've made, but I mean, one of the mistakes I made, and the client certainly benefited, but he would give me things like last minute. This was not this business, but another one. He would give me things last minute. I would be up till like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. trying to get it done. And so finally it dawned on me, like, I'm just not available to do this anymore. This is not why I started my own business, to have to be up all these hours. No. And so and I think that's another good piece of advice too for your listeners, is if you do And Tim Ferriss talks a lot about this too, if you've ever read The 4-Hour Work Week. But he talks about firing customers. If you get a customer that needs you to stay up till 2:00 in the morning, like mine did, and keeps changing his mind, like my customer did, fire him.
Yep. And don't hire the wrong customer.
Nicely, maybe, but I mean, that's just my kind of modus operandi. Nicely, but yeah, gone, check mark, done.
Totally agree with you. I have recently been through that where I took on a customer. I knew I shouldn't, but I knew I could help them. Right. And in the end, it became basically, I did say, I gave them their money back. I'm like, I'm not here 24/7 for you. I don't want to be here. And it was someone, and it's one of the reasons I love the 40 plus people. We're a little bit more realistic about technology. This was someone who expected, I send a message and I want you back right away. And I'm like, she's like, no, I don't want that quality of life. I don't want that. And I don't want to promote that quality of life in someone else as a business owner either.
No.
I grew up in an entrepreneurial world. My father was a plumbing heating contractor. Oh, and nice. It's one of those industries where there truly is emergencies. Mm-hmm. It's not, somebody calls at 3:00 in the morning, their pipes are burst.
And you get paid double for that, right?
Oh yeah, he got paid very well for it. But I lived in that knowing what an emergency was and wasn't.
Right.
And when my father, they bought a cottage so he could step away from that and have time. Mm-hmm. And I distinctly remember somebody phoning me and saying, "We need to speak to your father." I'm like, "I don't know where he is," but you should know, right? Just that kind of pressure of that expectation. And I did a workshop a while back for a mental health hospital. And it was really interesting. The people who were the most willing to give up their phones were the doctors, the ones who live in the emergency. It was the administrative people who had created this urgency around having their phones. And they were the only ones who, it's not that they didn't have urgent stuff, but nothing was in the moment urgent. Why doctors who live in the moment urgent were happy not to be on call. And my dad was the same. So when you have that sense of urgency, yes. You often want to step away from it. And yet our whole technology has created this false sense of urgency over everything. So I like your thing about firing clients who aren't your ideal clients, because you're not doing them any good and you're not serving yourself well either.
One of my favorite things about my business, other than how I help my people, is that I have my own schedule, and I'm very firm about that. Once in a while, if somebody's across the world can't reach me in my regular hours, I'll probably make an exception to some extent for them to get them on my schedule. But that's another piece of advice I give. Just set up your own schedule, make it work for you. Mm-hmm. And I love to sleep in the morning. I don't want to have to get up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. I did that for years and years and years working corporate. No, thank you.
Yeah, I love that. We're getting close to the end of our time. How can people learn about you, and where can they go to find out more information? How can they learn more about you?
Well, I'm on lots of different social media channels. My website is probably the easiest place. It's K for Karen, T for Trepte, Finances. So finance with an S at the end, .com. I go by that same name on a business page on Facebook. You can find me on my personal page on Karen Node Trepte. I'm on Pinterest, which actually I love that platform. That's also under KT Finances. And just being generous there, you'll find not only, but if you look at my board, for example, Money Saving Tips, or another board I have, Entrepreneurs in Business, you'll find not only my great ideas, but you'll find a lot of my colleagues' great ideas, because I pin all kinds of other people's things to that board.
Excellent. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes.
Thanks.
So other people can access them and do that. So that's really helpful.
Twitter is about the only one that I'm not very current in responding to, but LinkedIn, you can get a hold of me.
Good.
Pinterest, Facebook, all of those regular ones. Yep.
Excellent.
Oh, Instagram. I'm on Instagram too. So.
You're even further than me. I haven't gotten all those under. I do one at a time and get good at one and then move on. Yep. So it was, and I don't use Twitter very much either. It's not my brain space for me. So to wrap up, I always ask 3 questions.
Okay.
The first one is, what is your superpower?
My superpower is that I love people. It's just hands down. I love people. I love bonding with them. All my work, I was going to say in spite of its finance, but I would say especially since it's finance, I will sit on your side of the deck, and that's before my mom got Alzheimer's. After I finished my MBA, I went to College of Financial Planning. I wanted to be a CFP because they're the ones who really, by law anyway, they sit on their client's side of the fence. But I do that in my business. I would say that's my superpower.
Excellent. What's your favorite quote? Can you think of a favorite quote?
My favorite quote is really just pay yourself first.
Good one. Good piece of advice. Good quote.
Thanks. I mean, you could say, I think work is love made visible by Kahlil Gibran. That's another favorite one of mine. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And the last one is, what's the one most important message you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Repetition is great. Pay yourself first.
Yeah. That's what I figured would come for that one too. So thank you very much for your time. It was really enlightening and interesting, and I very much appreciate it. I know our listeners will too.
Perfect. Such an honor to be on your show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ready for More podcast. You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. My name is Heather Cameron. I'm your podcast host. And when I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm busy working with entrepreneurial women like you who are ready for more in their business and are looking to get focused on their own unique path to success. You can find more about myself and my programs at www.igniteyourmarket.com. If you like what you heard, feel free to rate, review, and share with your friends. And don't miss an episode by subscribing. Until next time, remember, now is the best time to focus on your more and be inspired by your own unique gifts.